Hello everyone and welcome to Fleet's Random Ramblings 4th of July special. Hope you're all having a fantastic 4th of July if you're an American. Also, obligatory British grumble, 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 rebellious colonies, grumble, grumble, grumble. But now I've got that out of the way, I don't have to mention it again. It's later than usual and it's a Thursday. It'll be interesting to see who we get, actually.
It will be.
Well, that reminds me I need you... There we go, okay. Make sure... wait, here we go. Here we go. And there we are. Make sure I've got the chat up so I can keep track of what's going on. Marvellous. Right. Okay. C-Cube. That's unsurprising. I will admit, that man does like Long Beach a little too much. I can't stand it. Blocky superstructure. It looks good on Enterprise. It looks terrible on Long Beach. She looks like...
Welcome to,
Happy birthday.
Well, I just saw the video. Welcome to early generation phased array radar.
Oh, God. Is that what is basically just very small blocks on the sides of ship superstructures now, whereas before it was like, ah, yes, I am the entire
It's not going to be very small.
Oh. Well, small,
well,
like small.
Think about the antennas, right? Like, they're going to be big. They're going to be heavy. This was at the very onset of attempting to do this stuff at sea.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, 4 people have turned up. Huzzah. Welcome, everybody, to, a surprise ramblings out of nowhere for the 4th of July. Cyclic's idea, actually, so you can all thank him for this.
Well, it wasn't really my idea, but, like...
Shh, take the credit.
You offered it up when we started talking about the last one. I'm just like, well, I don't care.
Take the credit.
Why would I take credit? It wasn't my idea.
Shh, just do it. Oh, dear. Oh, good lord. Alright, let's see. Have we got any questions? Scoot says, thank you, Cyclic, for coercing Fleet. I didn't need much coercing, to be fair. I don't need much of an excuse to ramble anyway. But yeah. How would the Admiral Wellesley T. Collingwood asks, how would the Washington Naval Treaty be changed if the RN finished 2 admirals? That's all they get. They don't get the Nelsons. Basically...
Yeah, they don't get the Nelsons.
No, the other powers don't get extra ships, but the RN is just stuck with 2 admirals. They don't get 3 16-inch
I think
ships.
the U.S. might have tried to get the either a pair of Sodaks or whatnot, because of the speed issue. But it was just a brief couple of lines, Arnett. It wasn't really a discussion. The U.S. would not have been happy. Let's put it that way.
Japan would have been apoplectic.
Well, Japan isn't the one that matters in these discussions.
No, true.
Because the whole point of the treaty was the U.S. didn't want to have to spend the money on it. Britain needed to spend the money elsewhere.
Yeah. Both powers could afford it. Neither side really had the stomach for it.
I'm not sure I'd say Britain could have afforded it because of the sacrifices Britain would have had to have made.
Yeah. No, what I mean is
So
they could have afforded it, in quotation marks. AKA, it's physically possible, but it's not really ideal or practical or, well, smart. On the topic of the Washington, well, first of all, WASP comes under Second London, not Washington. But there's not really much difference there. Let me see. When is WASP laid down? Because it's gonna... Let me see. WASP. USS WASP CV7. 1936 to 40. Thing is, 36 is about the time the treaty system basically falls apart. The reason that we see things like QEs, not QEs, sorry, KGVs and the NOCALs is that the designs are locked in and can't really be realistically changed that much, and they need ships now. Same thing with the South Dakotas, basically. If the US chooses to build WASP as a Yorktown, given the way the treaty system was already crumbling / collapsing, I don't think anyone would really mind, to be blunt. Everyone could tell a confrontation is coming in the next decade. It would also give the British an excuse to abandon the treaties earlier as well than they did historically. So the British might grumble publicly, but privately they'd be slapping their hands together and jumping for joy, as the US has basically given them the perfect excuse to just not care about the treaties anymore. Basically.
I mean, to be honest, the US could have just lied about WASP and probably gotten away with it.
Yeah.
Because, to be blunt, they could have said they had just sacrificed armor.
Yeah.
In certain spots, and didn't. But, or said that she just didn't have the fuel bunkerage or as much munition storage or stuff like that. Instead, it falls apart with the escalator clause, I believe, because of Italy. I can't remember exactly.
Japan.
I can't remember if Italy or Japan.
It's Japan. Japan walks out
Japan
the treaties.
pulling out. Okay, yeah. So but I don't view WASP as much of a mistake as a lot of people do.
She's not bad.
And the reason for that is a flight deck and a hangar with relatively decent munition storage is a flight deck and a hangar. And that's, to be honest, I don't even view Ranger as that bad. Ranger's biggest problem was she didn't have a torpedo magazine. That's why she wasn't sent to the Pacific. She had a bomb magazine. She had no storage for torpedoes that would have been safe. And the view was at the Pacific, the aircraft carriers needed to have torpedoes. So that's why Ranger wasn't sent.
Ranger did good work with her dive bombers, though, in Europe.
Yeah, because they viewed that Ranger would not be able to effectively engage Japanese heavy surface units.
Yeah. Although...
And to be honest, on moving heavy surface units, you really can't get precise enough with 1,000-pound dive bombs.
No. I mean, against Japanese carriers, it's kind of easy because you've got a nice big bullseye to aim for.
Well, it's not even that. It's the fact that on a carrier, you're aiming for the flight deck, right? You're not having to try to get a shot that's, or not a shot, but a drop that's going to stick. You don't want to land on the turrets if you can help it. You need to land on the deck, and there's so much other stuff going on. And battleships' deck armor is dramatically thicker anyways, but that it's just not it's not viable to try to attack them with dive bombs. If they're out at sea and moving. If they're stationary in port, you just repeatedly pummel them
Yeah.
until
Jumper.
your damage just accumulates enough that the ship isn't going to go out to sea. You're liable to make it harder to repair with dive bombs than you are with torpedoes in port. But, like...
I mean,
You know, it was the lack of torpedoes that kept her from going to the Pacific, like, bar none. If she had a torpedo magazine, other concerns notwithstanding, she would have ended up in the Pacific.
yeah.
Just full stop. Because the U.S. needed carriers. But without the ability to use torpedoes, she wasn't seen as a viable carrier in the Pacific.
Ranger's heavy AA battery is actually not as anemic as people like to think. Like, she really wasn't as bad as people give her credit for.
And to be honest, the best defense anyways is having a fast battleship or an AA cruiser next to you. Like, it's not necessarily your ship's own anti-aircraft battery.
And let's not forget...
Not getting hit is a lot harder than you think in a World War II context.
Yeah. And I would point out that Ranger... They actually succeeded in their goal with Ranger, which was to fit the air wing of a Lexington, well, excluding torpedo bombers, but in terms of number of aircraft, into a small hull. They succeeded with that, which is impressive in and of itself. Like, it's... Like, Ranger gave fantastic service in Europe. Like, she really did. Like, she pounded Jean Bart into... Well, with the help of a US battleship. She pounded Jean Bart into surrendering. Gave good support for...
She probably did more than the US battleship, to be honest.
Yes, I know. But I had to give credit, because if I didn't, someone would say, well, actually, there was a US battleship there as well. But yeah, and then of course there was the whole bit where Ranger hung about in the Caribbean for a bit to keep an eye on Bairn, not knowing that.
Not that Bairn was even capable of doing anything at that point. But
no,
yeah.
Because her aircraft had quite literally rotted.
Well, she couldn't even really fly them off of her, or even if they were operational. She was acting as a friggin' transport. She was not a viable carrier.
No. On that... Okay, sorry, Wellesley T. Collingwood. So, going really overboard on alternate history. Oh boy, here we go. I suppose this is what I signed up for with Ramblings, but hey-ho. But if the UK and Germany were allies in World War I, pulling the Germans, Japanese, pulling along the Japanese, Italians, and Americans to the Central Powers, and China on the Entente side, and Turks end up collapsing, how would the Washington Naval Treaty look? I have no fucking idea. Because to tell you the truth, I have no fucking idea how that war goes. I would have to sit down with multiple historians and literally cherry pick how that war goes.
To be honest, I don't...
There is no way to know. There is no way to actually give a concrete answer on that.
It's not World War One.
It's not.
To be blunt. It's an Eastern European imperial war, like, between Russia and Germany and Austria. Like, that's what it is.
Yeah. Because if the UK and Germany are allies, the Germans are going to go, nah, you're on your own. Like, they're not even... Like, if the Germans are allied to the UK, they don't have to get involved in continental affairs. They can just go, you know, Austria, you do what you want to do. Italy, you go and have a scrap with Austria if you want. Russia, if you want to have a crack at Austria, I don't really care, because Britain's there, and our trade is secure, which means our war machine is always going to be superior to the Russian empires, as long as Russia doesn't, you know, collapse. Because it basically removes one of Germany's big threats, which was because there's a whole thing where the German general staff felt they had to take the opportunity to go to war in 1914. because they were concerned that Russia would overtake them in another decade. If they have Britain guaranteeing open access to the seas for them, therefore basically guaranteeing that their war industry will always be able to access the open markets of the world, get whatever resources it needs, and there's nothing anyone can do to stop that, there is very little fear of Russia overtaking the German Empire. But I'm not going to take much more time on that because it's basically impossible for me to know how that Washington Naval Treaty would look. Arnett asks, how was Cap deconflicted with shipborne AA, or was that very much a secondary concern? Tell you the truth, I'm not exactly sure.
Generally speaking, you didn't fly into your own AA fire as the pilot. If you did, that was on you. Your job was to try to intercept and break up before the strike hit the AA.
At that point, it's the AA's job. If you've not got them down by then, it's up to the AA. The development of fighter direction over the course of the war was directly to make sure the two modes of shooting down aircraft worked together rather than conflicting.
No, it was more about making the fighters more effective at keeping the stuff from getting to the AA. In general. Generally speaking, as a pilot, you're going to know, hey, I don't want to get within X kilometers of the fleet unless I need to go specifically stop this threat or something like that. And then at that point, well, you're putting yourself at risk to your own flak. It's not as... It's not like it's not a modern air defense fighter deconfliction environment. They're two different environments. So you do have to keep that in mind. Flak is also hilariously
ineffective.
Impotent.
Yes, I was going to say. I was going to go with ineffective.
When you get down to it.
But impotent works too. Lazy Author asks, if the Korean War had...
And I should say that is from a modern perspective.
Yeah.
World War II, they're going to talk about it being very effective. And in World War II context, it can be, but that's also because their standards are so much lower.
If the Korean War hadn't happened, would anything significant change in regards to the Admirals' Revolt and the US Navy later on? What the heck is the Admirals' Revolt?
Okay, so there was a Secretary of Defense who viewed the Navy as a waste and largely was of the opinion we fight wars by just bombing them with atom bombs.
Oh.
To be honest, the Forrestal still would have happened around the same time. The Admiralty, that's the British term, but so a bunch of leading admirals basically just straight up resigned their commissions over his plan to gut the Navy. It's normally depicted as as the USS United States' cancellation. That was part of the issue. The overall issue was the fleet getting gutted. So you had a bunch of admirals resign their commissions quite publicly in front of Congress too. And that's the revolt of the admirals.
I see.
But
If-
without the Korean War, you're still going to get the Forestals, because that realization is going to hit planners like a sack of bricks, and it's going to hit them like a sack of bricks very quickly after the Korean War, anyways, in Europe, when they realize, oh, we've got to fight to potentially have to be ready to fight to defend Europe against the Soviets. And we can't do that purely with nuclear weapons, because you can't defend people that you exterminate.
That's one way of putting it, Cyclic.
And the advantage of high altitude, long range bombers rapidly would fade as the Soviets learned to actually build reasonable fighters.
Yes, they did.
Thank you, Fleet, for that one.
What?
The Brits are the reason the Soviets got a reasonable jet engine.
Now, look here. It wasn't my fault. Blame Clement Attlee. I told him not to do it.
That was a metaphorical thank you, Fleet.
I know. Look, I was doing a bit. And I was going with it. Admiral Wellesley T. Hollingwood asks, are world wars guaranteed when the Netherlands tries to buy a capital ship? No. Because
the Netherlands isn't that important.
No. I mean, I get what he's saying, the joke.
And everybody knows the Netherlands can't afford to operate it anyways in the period, so...
Yeah. Although everyone forgets the Netherlands operated full-size ocean-going turreted ironclads during the ironclad period. Everyone forgets that. Conveniently. Including a pair of very good turret ships.
And, I'll be honest. Oh no, the Netherlands gets 2 battle cruisers. Heck, oh no, the Netherlands gets 4 battle cruisers. Looks at geography. Looks at where they are.
Have fun
Looks
with
at
that.
what the threats around them are. Looks where their colonies are. Looks at the threats around those.
Have fun!
It changes nothing.
Yeah. You've basically just given more targets. If the Netherlands gets battle cruisers, they're more useful to the Allies as a whole than they are to the Netherlands. To be blunt.
If they even last that long.
Yeah, because if let's say I've said me and Guy in the panel have done this before, but if there's a battle cruiser in the Netherlands when the Germans invade, because the Netherlands aren't expecting to be invaded, they think it's going to be Schlieffen 2 Electric Boogaloo. The invasion of the Netherlands comes as a shock to them. The Stukas are going to have a field day with that fucking battle cruiser. I don't think it's going to get to leave the Scheldt.
So, somebody asked a question, because it's 4th of July, British Empire versus USA in the 1930s, who wins?
When in the 1930s?
Answer doesn't really matter. The answer is nobody. And the reason why is, good luck trying to sustain that. Do a terrain analysis of the U.S. and try to figure out how you're going to successfully invade the U.S.
And then do a force analysis
and then
of both
look
sides.
at the U.S.'s current state in the 30s and go, well, this is going to be a tough 8 years until we're able to build up the capacity to force them out. It's trying to invade the U.S. is just a way to get yourself sucked into very, very, very nasty guerrilla warfare.
Trying to, and if it's a war that comes up out of nowhere, which it would have to between the US and the British, because, well, there's no reason for them to clash. Invading Canada is much the same result, with the US Army being the way it is in the 30s.
Well, yeah, it's too small.
And the British will rush troops to make sure they can't invade, and the British will likely not try to invade the US for the same reason, because they know that
invading over the Canadian border isn't viable either.
Yeah, so you basically sat there. You basically sat there with both sides dug in, doing not much, and it's basically going to come down to which side's navy conducts themselves best.
DeWolfman, it's not even a gun behind every blade of grass. It's when you look at the terrain itself. You've got the Appalachians, you've got the East Coast swamps, you've got the very large amounts of forest. very specific lines of communication, so roads, rails, stuff like that, that has to pass through choke points that have tons of concealment around them.
The only
It's a nightmare today, even if the U.S. military evaporated. Okay?
Yeah.
And you had all the manpower of the Chinese.
Yeah. The only place where there might be some engagements boiling away constantly would be the Great Lakes. And I don't mean on the lakes themselves. I mean because of the preponderance of infrastructure between the Canadians, between Canada and the US in that region. It's the only real place you can conduct...
Be like constant skirmishing, yeah.
Yeah. Like anywhere else, it's just going to be, hey, Hank, yeah, you Canadian fuck. Are we just sat in the trench opposite each other? Yeah, pretty much. How long have we been doing this? About 4 years. Merry Christmas.
To be honest, I'm not even sure you'd see trenches, and here's why. The infrastructure disparity on either sides of the border. Like, yes, there's more infrastructure there on the Canadian side, but there's not a lot of infrastructure to get there from elsewhere in Canada unless you go up the St. Lawrence Seaway.
Yeah, I was being...
Which runs you into some serious problems regarding certain aspects of canals and locks that are not on the Canadian side.
Yeah. It is basically, yeah, as you've said, Wellesley, it's a stalemate. It literally is.
It's a stalemate until the U.S. goes, hold my beer, economically.
The British are already in debt to the US to the tune of God knows how much fucking money at this point. That's how the US wins. They just...
That doesn't win you a war, Fleet. That never wins wars.
But no, what I mean is, where's Britain getting the credit to fund this war?
It's a wartime economy. It's just what pain do you want to deal with after the war? You can magic it up.
So yeah, Britain's gonna have to Imperial Germany it, do the same, basically gutting of its own empire and its own economy to fund the war. But Britain can do it. It's gonna hurt afterwards.
Yes, Arnett. Particularly in this time period, the U.S. has pretty much everything it needs to fight. Now, yeah, okay, they're going to be short on tungsten. You can get around that. As for rubber, you already have synthetic rubber stuff developed by this point, and that's from oil, and the U.S. has the best quality oil on the planet, and also some of the largest production capacity of oil, and most of it's well out of reach of the British. It would take the U.S. 8, maybe 10 years because of the issues that are present in the 1930s. But, like, nobody wins this war.
No.
Just straight up, nobody wins this war. But moving to a different question I saw, how would you redesign the Sovietsky Soyuz class?
Can I go first?
To be blunt, I'd redesign it by removing Stalin.
Yeah.
And not building it or designing it.
Yeah.
I'd make it a fucking carrier, excuse my French.
It's fine. You're not on Dr. Clark's channel anymore. You can swear here. It's fine.
Yeah, I'd redesign it by making it an aircraft carrier. I'm fully aware they don't really have good aircraft for it. It'd still be more useful.
Yeah. Personally, I'd just downscale it. The Russians have a fairly decent 14-inch gun that they were building for the Borodinos.
They can't make the armor plate.
No, but this is the thing. You downscale it. So you downscale the protection to resist the 14-inch gun that it's going to be. That it's now.
They can't make that. They lost all of that during the revolution.
No, I know. So the thing is, I have to work with what I've got, and I have to accept certain things. So I have to accept that I'm probably not going to get... Like, my armor value might be X, but it'll be made up of 2 separate plates and will actually be value Y. And I have to work within that limit. I can get the guns. 14-inch guns, they can just about build them. Like, we know they actually got to building the 16-inch. So building the 14-inch, which is a design they already have, and basically just warming it over, is possible. Don't be silly, so I'd say honestly, go for a similar speed to the Ganguts. So go for 21 knots, so you're not trying to build bullshit machinery to move this thing anywhere. Basically build it to support the Ganguts and dominate the Baltic and Black Seas. So, say, a ship of about 40,000 tons, 8 to 9. Honestly, I'd go with 9, because they can build triples. We know they can still build triples. It's something they haven't lost. Look at what you're fighting, so look at things like the Scharnhorsts, look at things like the Deutschlands, and go, I basically need to defend against the 11-inch guns they're carrying. And even with Russian armor quality being what it is, and, 2 plates stuck together, blah blah blah, if I armor my ships to theoretically defend against their own 14-inch guns, they should just about be able to resist the 11-inch guns on the Scharnhorsts, give or take. 21 to 25 knots, depending on how brave the Russians are feeling. And that's basically it. You basically go for a far less ridiculous design. And something that will stretch Russian capability, yes, but not stretch it to breaking point. Or, as Cyclic says, yeah, the other option is just build a carrier from the keel up.
Gunnery officer, they had reasonable aircraft all through the whole war. They had the aircraft they needed. The problem was they didn't have the pilots they needed after a couple of major engagements, because they didn't. So the big thing the U.S. did differently than there's 2 things in pilot training the U.S. did differently than basically everybody else, even our own allies. One was pre-war, we were already training people on deflection shooting, which is the number one way you get shots in air combat.
Mm-hmm.
But 2 was we designed our training systems to be able to rapidly and efficiently scale up the number of trainees. And this is something that the British would take longer to do, because they didn't have the mechanisms in place to do it. They had to come up with those on the fly, but they recognized basically the moment the war started that they were going to need to do this. And none of our enemies recognized this.
Yep, basically.
And France never had time.
Yeah. Did the UK
or
follow
even a reasonable starting
Did
place.
the UK follow the US lead in terms of pilot training?
Training for deflection shooting?
Yeah, and just training generally.
Yeah, the UK rapidly shifted to training pilots for deflection shooting after their initial combat experience. I think the Japanese did as well. But I don't believe the Germans ever instituted it. It was something you always had to get taught to do in your squadron by people who had figured it out the hard way.
Yeah, which is not the best way to actually...
It wasn't like a formalized training to get everybody onto a standard, and then you can be taught tips and tricks by more experienced members of your squadron when you arrive.
The thing that people forget about the IGN when we're coming into 43 is that the IGN's actually reconstituted a fairly capable number of decent carriers. Like, they've got the flight decks to contest the US. Not outright smack them down, but make a fight of it in 43, 44 until basically the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot.
Yeah, if their aviators had been appropriately trained, the Battle of the Philippine Sea could have been a battle and not a massacre.
Yeah, like Philippine Sea was Like by the Japanese officers after the fact own admission, Philippine Sea was them going for their big decisive battle. That was their whole modus operandi for doing it. Yes, it was partially to stop the invasion of the Philippines, but no, the Pacific War wouldn't have been longer. It's just
no, it wouldn't have been long. Depending on if the Japanese win somehow, I don't see how, but if they were to win and force the U.S. to not invade the Marianas, to pull out.
Yeah, for them to win at Philippine
then
Sea,
that would have delayed the war. But ending. That said, that only makes the end result dramatically more worse for them.
Yep.
Like the problem with the Axis extending the length of the war is
the Allies just come harder.
Well, let me put it to you this way. The U.S. had an active surface-to-air missile program that involved an active radar-seeking missile.
And, of course, there's also the spicy rock dropped from Flying Metal Bird.
And a twin-arm launcher that would work in a 5-inch gun. Like, dual 5-inch gun turret space.
I mean, Sierra, if the
program that would lead to the modern standard missiles, now after many iterations of evolution, started in World War II.
Yeah, and then of course, let's not forget the Bat, which would have been absolutely hilarious to watch clobbering Japanese.
Bat isn't the one you need to worry about. You got Gargoyle. There's dozens of these.
Like, you think
you've got acoustic homing torpedoes. You've got
you think
yes, they absolutely are very goofy, Sam Sierra, but they're a thing, and they're starting to get to the point where their PK is getting close to competitive to. Yeah.
It's really genuinely funny.
But feel free to jump in here, Sierra, since this is more your wheelhouse than mine.
The funniest thing, everyone goes about if the war had gone on longer, the Axis would have got. I said, and then I remember someone said that, and I turned around to them and said, "Motherfucker, if the war had gone on longer, Berlin would be a crater." Because a B-29 would have shown up.
B-29, dude. You know when B-36 started, right?
Yeah, I know, but it's more likely a B-29 would have shown up in Europe. B-36 would probably have gone to the Pacific and gone, "Ha-ha, I'm going to bomb you from Pearl Harbor."
B-36 was designed to bomb Germany from the continental U.S.
Fuck me. Don't, actually, but Jesus. And those would have been
atomic bomber rays. And also keep in mind that the P-80 is a thing. Meteor is a thing. They're dramatically better fighters than 262. It's not close.
You've got Vampire coming in as well, just as the war ends.
You've got American super props that just...
They're cranked. They're absolutely fucking cranked.
Make 262 look like a joke. It's not F-80 at this point, Wolfman. It's P-80.
Yeah. You've got, what's it called? That fucking...
In the Pacific, you've got F-7F, you've got F-8F.
What's that combined prop jet that they built to give a dash speed to catch kamikazes? What was it called? Fuck! I can't remember the name of it. Streak?
Japanese Oka?
No. The US had a combined prop jet fighter it operated from its carriers for a while.
You mean turboprop?
No. I mean a prop at the front and a jet at the back. No, not Thunder Screech. I'm trying to remember. No, not Thunder Screech. It came about because they wanted a jet on a carrier now, but they didn't want to go through the process of getting a proper jet at this point. They were concerned about the invasion of mainland Japan. They'd got the thing about the large number of kamikazes. What they wanted was some... Yes! That's it! The Ryan FR Fireball! That's exactly it.
I mean, to be honest, F7F and F8F were more than good enough for that role.
Oh no, absolutely. I just wanted to draw attention to it because it's not a very well-known aircraft.
The other thing is, keep in mind the first flight of the FH Phantom was in 1945. It was introduced in August of 1947.
It depends how many nuclear weapons are needed before the general staff throws up the towel and says, "We surrender." Because it's one thing to keep going under De Fuhrer when you're just getting conventional bombed and attacked. It's another when it's quite another when several cities disappear. They already tried to kill Hitler once. What makes you think they wouldn't try to do it again if German cities are disappearing? Like, genuinely. Like, it's the reverse of Japan. In Japan, you don't want to kill the spiritual head of state.
The Allies didn't want to kill Hitler either because they knew he was shortening the war.
Oh.
Yeah. He was absolutely shortening the war with his stupid decisions. And they knew about it.
What about my 45 though? When they're on German soil, wouldn't killing him enable?
They don't
generals...
care. By that point, they don't care. They don't need to kill him. Doesn't matter anymore. Why risk it?
Well,
why risk the personnel? At that point, it's not going to speed up or slow down the war for you.
Oh no, I'm talking about in the terms of a longer conflict. Like, if you drop an atom bomb on Berlin and Hitler dies, it's likely that the generals will go, right, that's it, we're done.
Maybe, maybe not. Like, the fun part about prolonging the war in Europe is it just means more ground Soviet. Like,
yeah, that's not really ideal.
Wellesley, the SS didn't know what the hell they were doing in combat.
And besides, the SS by 45 are actually defecting en masse. Like, there are occasions where you have SS officers working with the Allies to do stupid shit. It's kind of silly. I'll be back in a second.
But, like, oh no, you prolong the war near Japan. Well, if you prolong it too long, the 3-inch 50 shows up. With its own on-mount radar director and proxy-fused shells. F8F and F7F show up. Well, before you even get to the point of nuking Tokyo here. Because here's the other thing. What's more concerning than a third nuke, Wellesley, is the fact that every single bomber involved in the combined bomber offensive against Nazi Germany was on its way to Okinawa to launch firebombing raids on Japan. The amount of bomber-capable airfields that were under construction on that island was terrifying. Like, they'd be useful AA escorts if you have to go in with an invasion, but given the potential kamikaze threat. But, like, the fundamental thing here is the Allies held all the cards. The Axis powers picked a fight with the foremost industrial powers on the planet. And those powers had the populations to back up their industrial might. This is bad for one's health, I'll say. The US and UK didn't rush to field fighter jets over Germany, not because they couldn't make them. We had them. We didn't see the need. We'd rather spend the time perfecting the design than rushing it out into combat. Okay or not, Sierra, it's why turn away more AA? But like the war just doesn't get better. I mean, towards the end of the Battle of the Atlantic, quote unquote, Allied aircraft are dropping acoustic homing torpedoes on Kriegsmarine subs instead of depth charges. Like, it just makes things worse for them the longer the war goes on. If by Mark 24 you mean the Fido, yes. The first confirmed sinking is believed to be in May of 1943. Effective range about 4,000 yards. 10-minute search duration. It's not a very difficult thing to figure out once you have sonar, active sonar at all. It's pretty easy to design a homing capability. And yeah, a lot of these were passive, but that's even easier. Yeah, and like again, this weapon got used in combat in 43. And it wasn't just an airdropped thing.
Oh boy, wait, steady on. Whoa, oh boy, oh, crikey, whoa. I'm back. What are we on now, Cyclic? What are we on now?
We were just talking about the Fido.
Oh, the Fido, that's a funny boy. Seed otters? No, or I'll give you more things to create.
Seed otters, careful. I know a lot of people that are looking for someone named Front, and they're not happy with them.
Oh, good. Good lord. Anyway, just chuckle for a minute before I lose my mind. Anyway, so, where are we? Right. Oh no, the Allies were actually aware of the Axis acoustic torpedoes. They even developed countermeasures. Yeah, the Allies developed countermeasures to tow behind escorts.
By when fleet?
Oh.
Because Fido's believed first kill is in 43.
I think the Allies had countermeasures by late 40. I don't know actually off the top of my head. It's either late 42, early 43 is when the early models come in, and then the improved version is 44 for the towed countermeasures. Ah, Watu, yeah, that's right. Nuclear bomb versus HMS Warsight. Could she survive? Considering how well some of the ships in Bikini Atoll survived, although that may be down to the USAF's inability to hit the broadside of a bomb with a fucking atom bomb. Turns out nuclear explosions at sea are, depending on their exact circumstance, somewhat easy to actually ride out in a warship. Depends entirely on the situation, though, and it is subjective. Obviously, getting a nuke explode right above a turret is a bit of a... Yeah, congratulations, you're no longer part of the universe. But if a nuke explodes, say, 10 miles away, the ship might survive. Although, I'm open to Cyclic correcting me on this, since I have known to be wrong on shit like this before.
I mean, generally, you don't want a nuke going off right next to you or in contact with you. As a ship, bad things are going to happen to you. There is a reason that nuclear-tipped anti-ship missiles are a thing. Nuclear weapons are a warhead option for anti-ship missiles in a lot of cases. Nothing quite deals with a target like the limitless power of the friendly atom. Particularly if applied precisely. But purely relying on blast effect to account for absolutely terrible free fall airdropped accuracy is not viable.
No. Basically.
Also, fun fact, there was a guided tall boy.
Which is a terrifying concept.
The US took the guidance technology they had for a 1,000-pound bomb that they had been trying to use on bridges and applied it to a tall boy.
Which, if that doesn't terrify you...
Because they got a little sick of having to achieve an average of 4 direct hits on bridge pillars with the 1,000-pound bombs, when generally 1 out of every 3 would fail to guide. So they went, well, let's just drop 6 bombs and call it good.
Because a tall boy will fuck up whatever it hits, or even whatever it fucking misses.
Even if it doesn't arm and detonate inside of it.
Yeah, basically.
And by the way, the radio guided tall boy is a post World War II thing. It is more of a Korean thing. That being said, the guidance technology existed. It is not a very difficult leap.
Yeah, basically.
By the way, we're not restricted to World War II today or anything like that.
No,
either,
we're not.
so.
Like you can ask different questions, but we're happy to talk. I mean, I like talking about World War II. I actually know certain things. If we go beyond it, I basically have to sit, nod, and say, "Wow, Cyclic, you know things." If we go beyond the Second World War. I mean, imagine getting hit directly by a tallboy. Yeah, Tirpitz didn't like it, but then again, Tirpitz got lucky because the tallboy went right through her and exploded in the ground beneath her after penetrating the earth. I can't think of any. The only ship I can think that would have the misfortune of being hit by a tallboy and then, having that tallboy fetch up within the ship is the Yamato class. And at that point, I think we turned the Yamato into the world's biggest ammunition explosion.
Hey, add Phoenix to the stage.
Oh, yay! Phoenix is back! Happy fleet noises. Yay! Phoenix is back. Right. More questions then. Oh, Phoenix. Okay, bring him back.
Try again. His mic.
I got it. There we go. Hello. God damn it.
Phoenix is having technical difficulties.
Lazy Orphan asks if.
No,
Hey, there we go.
Hey, okay.
If Lazy Author-san asks if, in the aftermath of Taranto, the Germans decided they actually might need a carrier now and restarted construction of the Graf Zeppelin about a month later, by what year could they have her fit for deployment with an airwing? Okay, so there's a certain... So the Germans do actually have a brief moment where they do restart carrier production, which is actually brought on by the performance of Allied escort and full-size carriers, and what they're getting up to. So there is actually a period where not only do the Germans restart carrier production, but they drag in Seydlitz nearly complete for conversion to a carrier. Then, of course, there's a whole thing where then the surface fleet fucks up, and Hitler goes, right, that's it, we're scrapping things. Like, the whole thing with German
Remember what I said earlier about Hitler shortening the war? Yeah. There's a reason they didn't want to kill him.
Yeah. But if we magically say no one can interfere and Graf Zeppelin is restarted after Taranto to a design that's not being altered,
I would say the difficulty then the question really becomes what flies off of it.
Yeah, like they can complete her
on Tuesday.
Like they can complete her. That's not a problem. Like she came very close to being completed. But as we discussed on Tuesday, it's what's her air wing. It'll probably be BF 190s, fucking sadly. And they'll have to use the cats
if
for
they
them.
Can recover them properly.
Yeah.
That's kind of the thing. Like I was mentioning on Tuesday, they really never got the actual like a landing system down properly, which really just kind of throws the entire question of what they could actually operate off of either Graf Zeppelin or Aquila, because they had pretty much the same landing arrangements. Whether they could actually operate any meaningful full-sized aircraft off of them, and that's even with having reverse engineered the tail hook off of the Martlets.
For a German, honestly, if I'm gonna be completely fucking blunt, she may not operate German aircraft, if I'm going to be completely fucking blunt. The Germans, I know this is going to be, this is, like, we know the Axis does occasionally work together on things. The Italians were actually better in terms of what they had available, in terms of the RA2000s and the C200s they were working up for Aquila.
That wouldn't have happened because the Luftwaffe was going to control the air wing, and even the Kriegsmarine wouldn't have gone for it.
I'm struggling to think what they offer. If, like, assuming a 42 completion into commission, I'm genuinely...
It's going to be 109s. And
they still hadn't validated the landing system that they were working on, even by, like, up to the point of the Italian armistice. So I don't know if either fighter aircraft is really...
I'm saying that's what their plan is going to be. I mean, if they don't have a valid landing system, then the carrier's going to be a pure queen anyways. But those are going to be the aircraft they base it off of.
Yeah. But yeah, it's 42. If she's restarted in 40 and the design isn't altered and they don't stop, then yeah, 42. And they can probably scrape together some form of air wing for her. Heck, if they're desperate, they may fucking go for Henschel 1-2 fucking 3s as dive bombers. They would be able to fly off her.
They had more than enough Stukas.
No, what I mean is they're actually...
Stuka is actually one thing they... Actually, hang on. I actually don't remember. Did they even properly land the...
The problem with Stuka is it can't take off. Like none of the aircraft that we're talking about in terms of Ju-87T or Bf-109T can take off on a rolling takeoff. They have to use the CATs. And that comes into the problem of cycle rate and sortie rate.
I mean, again, fleet, you just live with it.
Yeah.
The two aircraft that I know the Germans did successfully do landing trials with, at least granted on land, would be
the Stuka can get slow enough to land without it.
And the Phi 167, which is that biplane torpedo bomber.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're probably looking at an air wing of Phi 167s, Bf-109Ts, and Stukas for dive bomber, torpedo bomber, and fighter. Would Graf live particularly long? Yeah, probably. She'd go up to Norway and sit next to Tirpitz. If you want to know.
I don't think she'd live very long. She's very vulnerable to dive bomb strikes. In a way that, like, Tirpitz and Scharnhorst just aren't.
Hang on. They abandoned the Phi 167 in 1942 with technical difficulties, so I don't even know if that would be on the cards.
Yeah, honestly, Rangers SPDs could have a go, and they'd probably succeed. 1,000-pounders down.
They'd terror a new one. I mean, they'd open her up like a tin can.
Oh, absolutely. I don't deny that at all.
And it's not like Ranger didn't spend time up in the North Atlantic sitting off of Norway or anything.
Yeah. Admiral Steve Collingwood said... Oh, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Now, what is your opinion of the Barbel-class submarine? Why did the USN still need diesel subs, even though they were going with nuclear-powered subs? Also, what role would they have if the Cold War had gone on in the 60s? It's important to bear in mind that the nuclear submarine is still a developing technology when the barbels are coming in. The US is basically hedging its bets and saying, look, we think this nuclear stuff's pretty good, but we don't want to completely commit to it until we've basically matured the tech, which happens by the 70s.
Well, it's more than that. We needed numbers. And production capacity, well, you could build more.
That makes sense, yeah.
By just doing the barbels, too. And it also provided very useful data on a conventional submarine with a teardrop hull.
Oh, yeah. It's a good shout. Yeah, fair point.
And it's not like the U.S. didn't forward deploy subs. Like, the modern context of subs deploying out from CONUS only, CONUS being continental United States to anybody who doesn't know, wasn't a thing. There were subs that operated out of Italy. There were subs that operated out of the UK. There were subs that operated out of Norway. So, keep that one in mind too. And like performance-wise, the barbells weren't bad because of that teardrop hull, particularly when compared to their Soviet counterparts. You didn't get a Soviet SSK with a teardrop hull till the kilos.
Yeah. Wells T. Collingwood says, Argentine Littorios. I can answer this myself without having to torture Cyclical Phoenix with it. By the time we get to the Second World War, the navies of South America were very well aware that they were not going to replace their capital ships. They were going to bow out when the South American navies decided they were going to bow out, and they were not going to be replaced.
Guano wasn't a viable export anymore. Let's put it to you that way. They couldn't get away with exporting shit anymore.
And there's also the whole they didn't need battleships anymore. Well, heck,
I heard the snicker there, Phoenix.
Yeah. I know what you did.
You see the Brazilian battleships go first because, well, they were never really maintained, and they were by far the weakest of the various battleships built for the South Americans. The strongest battleships in South America, which are the Riverdavias. Fuck you, I don't care that fucking Almirante Latorre has 14-inch guns. The Riverdavias can fight her to a standstill, and kill her. Anyway, tangent aside, the Riverdavias, I think, go in the 50s and 60s, out of service, and then are scrapped in the late 60s, and it's a similar story with Almirante Latorre. What you see replacing them
They moved to cruisers for a reason.
Yeah, you see cruisers
largely Brooklyns.
Yeah, although the Chileans had to be special and buy Dutch and Swedish, because of course they did.
Chile.
Then you see Brazil, and then you see a miniature version of the basically enabled by that most wondrous of thing, British light fleet carriers. Another mini arms race where the Argentinians buy one and the Brazilians buy one. You know, there's a whole thing, and Chile doesn't buy one. And Chile doesn't buy one because they go, we don't care.
I'd say that this kind of it's key to keep in mind with all the Latin American powers that their ability to really build up large navies was really fueled by the great export boom from the 1870s that kind of dried up around 1830, and 1930, sorry, and that just basically puts them too late for new capital ships. Because don't forget, every nation who can build capital ships is until like 1936. Being Japan, is under the terms of the Washington and London Naval Treaty, so they cannot build proper battleships for export. They're mostly going to build cruisers anyways, and most Latin American navies can't really bother to afford new battleships regardless. I mean, most of them couldn't afford much at all. I mean, really, the Argentines ordering 2 cruisers and the modern destroyer fleet that they had actually put them basically head and shoulder above every other.
Oh yeah, I mean, the Argentinians were the first. The Argentinians were the first to see which way the wind was blowing, and to be fair,
they just put in orders in general. If you look at like the Brazilian or Chilean navies in these periods, they really did not put much in the way of orders in for new vessels. So when you couple that with the fact that their battleships were essentially non-functional as fleet units in this period, the Argentines had almost uncontested naval supremacy.
Oh, I'm going to blood. The Argentines were also the only ones with functioning battleships. The Riverdavias were actually functional combat vessels in the 30s, up until about early 1942. Like, the Argentinians had kept them in fairly decent nick. Perhaps even better than the Chileans did. And I still stand by my statement that the Riverdavias were the best of the South American dreadnoughts, basically because they had the armor to resist the guns of the other South American dreadnoughts in a way the others just couldn't. The Riverdavia's 12-inch 50s would absolutely have a field day punching through the 10-inch belt of Almirante Latorre and laugh hysterically while tearing the flipping Minas Gerais class apart, while laughing hysterically at the Minas Gerais' failure to penetrate their 12-inch belt, and probably being concerned by Almirante Latorre, but there's 2 Riverdavias fighting 1 Almirante Latorre. We all know how that engagement's going to go.
Yeah,
if it happens.
2-on-1 is just never going to favor the one. unless there's a severe range imbalance.
And
But-
Almirante Territory doesn't have the fire control to exploit her 14-inch guns for that range imbalance.
Yeah, no. They're all three of those navies are going to be fighting relatively close in, and at that point,
At that
that is a
point,
good
it's-
argument for just having more guns,
Yeah,
and especially on 2 different ships. I mean, forget about it.
yeah. I mean,
But
and the best thing is the Rivadavias, like they were some of the best laid out cross deck firing ships ever built. They could very handily use their full 12-gun broadside without blowing their own deck superstructure apart.
yeah,
Your typical gunnery officer. That's exactly what happened. They did buy aircraft carriers. That's literally exactly what happened. They went to Britain and said, "Hey, can we buy light fleets, please?" Or the Dutch, or whoever.
Yeah, like the South Americans bought a bunch of second or third hand carriers in the 50s. Like a lot.
For very similar reasons that we saw the
Viente
dreadnoughts
Cinco
being
de
procured.
Mayo in the 80s, the one that, almost got us a carrier engagement in the Falklands War. Yeah, she was a British light fleet. Purchased as part of that race.
Essex. The thing is, Wellesley. The thing you understand is the light.
Essexes were too personnel intensive.
Yeah, the thing people need to understand is the reason we see a lot of navies operating carriers in the early Cold War period, from about 1950 to 1980 to 90, is the British light fleets. They were this lovely sweet spot where you got enough capability to be worth it. They could be converted to Cadobar, and they weren't that personnel intensive. They were this lovely sweet spot that you didn't really get before or after them.
They were just big enough to operate, things like A4 Skyhawks, even some of the Ethandards, and actually you could operate F4 Phantoms off of them if you really tried hard enough.
Well, I also know that a big part of the utility became, like, once you get into the 60s and, like, it was just, like, you can operate an S2 tracker. You are now a very, very useful ASW platform
Yes.
for our Navy, as opposed to really a strike role. Granted, they could still fill that strike role.
And this wasn't something that, like, an Independence-class CVL could do.
No.
Well, actually, I'm not sure if the Brazilian carrier ever had a strike role. I mean, their light fleet had a strike role at all. I'm not sure,
I
but-
don't think the Brazilians got a strike capable carrier until they got one of the Clemenceaus.
Yeah, because I think they just had trackers and Sea Kings, but
They couldn't buy them in large numbers, gunnery officer. They didn't have the money or the people.
This is the thing is the light fleets were unique in what they offered.
If they had the ability to operate 2 or 3 light fleets, they would have bought Essexes.
Yeah.
or frankly, they would have bulked up their escort fleets because
Yeah,
Yeah.
one or
they
the
were
other.
really
Like,
not up to par.
This basically thing is the Independence is too small of a carrier. You can't operate fixed wing jets off them. You can't.
not until the Harrier.
Yeah, you can't Cadobar them, and they just don't offer you much in the way of capability. The Essexes are too much. The Essexes are too much carrier. They're too resource intensive. They're too manpower intensive, and to be blunt, they're old and heavily used. In terms of age and actual usage on their turbines, etc. The light fleets are big enough to Cadobar. You can operate fixed-wing aircraft from them, and compared to Essexes, they're usually younger and have been less heavily used.
I'd also just say in general, if you have a navy that is capable of operating a full-size fleet carrier, and like actually has the resources and ability and need to make use of them, you're talking about a nation that already has the ability to build a carrier on their own,
Yeah.
and it's not buying them secondhand from abroad.
Absolutely.
That's just a tier of capability you're talking about.
Yeah. This is something I need
yeah,
to.
by the time the French were able to do that, they were able to build the Clemenceaus.
Yeah.
And they did.
One thing I'm just going to say that a lot of people forget: when nations are looking to buy warships second-hand, one of the things they look for is not just raw capability. It's also how much will it cost to run, how much will it cost to acquire, can we crew it, and most importantly of all, how much mileage has it got on the clock, basically? How worn down are its systems? How worn down are the engines? Is it leaky? Does it rust? Has it got metal fatigue? This is the thing.
Well, it's a ship; it's gonna rust. But
You get the point, Simon. I'm just trying to hammer that point home because a lot of people do seem to forget that.
it's can you sustain it,
Yeah, sustainment.
and can you
costs are-
sustain it in a context where it's of use? And what do I mean by that? If we're talking a carrier, can you sustain it while also being able to sustain the escort required for you to use it in the way you want to use it?
Hmm. It's one of the reasons.
And sustain and buy the air wing.
Yeah, that's a big thing as well. Because the carrier's nice. If you've not got anything to fly off the carrier, it's just a beer
Pointless.
queen.
It's a waste of money.
Like here's the thing. There's a reason. Like there's a reason why the Argentinians, when they had the option to buy Type 42s, took the option because they are great escorts for something like for Cinco de Mayo. Okay, yeah. Stop grumbling. Stop grumbling for the price range they are.
Again, grumble, grumble, grumble. Looks at.
Yes, I know US ships would have been better, but they
I'm
were
not even thinking U.S. because it's not fair to compare them to Perry's.
Oh, I know.
Hey, Phoenix. How'd those French and Italian single-arm bandit ships look?
Yeah, but,
well, hang on. What's actually building at the time? 'Cause the fall.
yeah,
when
I
did
know the
Argentine
bloody.
type?
Like, what was comparable in Europe to the build of the 42s? I'm actually
let's-
curious.
Hang on a second. I forget when the Argentine ones were built. Hang on. Hercules was laid down in 1970. Trinidad 1970. So that's Apache class would be around the same time. That'd be your modern destroyer in Europe. So that is you have single arm bandit for Tartar 40 rounds, 2 5-inch guns, 476. Not fitted for anti-ship missiles yet, but that's because again these were laid down in like 1968. And
Keep in mind, by the way, that Mark 13 single arm puts out missiles faster than the twin arm by a mile
Yeah,
than the
it's
twin arm on the 42.
I have the full.
yeah, it's kind of
thing
silly.
that it's done.
It is. We kind of yeah. Like the more I talk Cold War procurement and British Cold War procurement in particular across all branches, the more I go. Get me a fucking
You
time
think
machine
also-
so I could strangle these fucking bastards.
They also had a dual hangar for AB2 and 2 ASWs. Interesting to note that the earlier Impavido class, which are basically Italian Chuck Adams, those have been upgraded to SM1 MR at this point.
I love that ship. It looks really nice.
But the only thing I'm not sure about is what the electronic warfare site was. I know they had decoy launchers, but I haven't nailed down the electronic attack modules.
Oh, hang on.
Fair enough. We're hanging.
Yeah. I think the French, unfortunately, at this point, were working with the AAWI's T-47s, which did have SM1 at this point in time too, but they were just older platforms because they were first post-war destroyers, but they just got Tartar kits before them when they canceled the third Suffren class frigate. So those have, one Mark 13 launcher, 6 57mm guns and 3 twins, 1 helicopter, 2.
Makes sense.
Sorry, that was a pizza delivery driver.
That's fine.
Calling.
So, Admiral Wellesley Collingwood asks, if someone was allowed to keep Littorios, who'd get them? It's really easy to answer that question. The
Soviets.
the Italian Navy.
No.
It wouldn't take it wouldn't
No.
have taken much of a push.
Well, no, here's the thing.
No, there's the problem,
for-
fleet.
Well, don't keep in mind, there were 2 powers that were permitted to keep them. The UK and the United States. They were both allocated to each one a Littorio. It's just in part because they didn't really have much of a need for them. Where in the case of the Americans, they just had no need. The British thought about it, but then just did not have the money to sustain that many modern battleships, so said no. And the Americans just gave it back to the Italians to just scrap it. The British said just they gave it back and said scrap it, but you have to give us like I think it was like 20,000 tons of steel, raw steel from scrap value by like 1948 or 1949, I forget. But that
Soviets
would,
were
otherwise,
pushing
if they'd wanted to keep them, they could have kept them if they wanted to.
Weren't the Soviets pushing hard for them? I
They
thought there
were,
was a
yeah.
whole
This
deal
was
over that.
kind of part of the mechanism of telling the Soviets to fuck off, right? The Americans and British each got one Littorio because there was only two left. Because Roma had sunk and Imperial was a hulk. She'd been sunk by the end of her hulk had been sunk by the end of the war. And then the only three remaining battleships were just the three rebuilds, and they gave the Soviets Giulio Cesare
Which
as
was-
compensation.
Yeah, like, and the
Which was the oldest and weakest configuration of the three remaining battleships, yes. Which is kind of funny when you think about it.
The
But
fact
that's still
the
the most
Soviets-
powerful battleship the Soviets ever operated.
yeah, it is kind of fun. I still think the Ganguts
Royal
were
Sovereign
better.
was
I still think the
Royal
Ganguts were
Sovereign-
better.
the Ganguts, but much slower, less modern fire control, worse armor.
They didn't really.
I don't know about that.
The fire control wasn't completely up to date, but it's about on par with Giulio Cesare's. They did have a very heavy fire control refit in the mid-30s. Why do you think they got
Yeah,
the
but I'm
massive
pre-
fucking pagoda masts?
I mean, yeah, no. Let me just actually double check because I know they compared the system very favorably with those. Hang on. let me see.
They got increased
Acre
elevation
system,
for the
right?
12-inch guns. They got new fire control fit, and I think they also got reboilered in the mid-30s.
Oh yeah. So this is actually not even the full battleship system that they're working with, but when the Italians sold them the scaled down destroyer system for the Leningrad class, the Project 1 destroyers, they were apparently evaluated as being much better than Acre, which is what they put into the battleships. So
No, God
that is
damn it.
a worse system than what Giulio Cesare had. So
Oh, you
um,
stop poking holes in my carefully crafted.
I'm just saying. I'm just
no,
saying.
I know, and
Phoenix
I
over here holding his hands up.
appreciate-
I'm just saying.
Yeah, I appreciate it, but I do occasionally have to say stop poking holes in my carefully crafted world.
Stop blowing holes in my ship.
All right, more questions.
There
please.
seems to be something wrong with our bloody ships today.
Hey, I got to say that line. I am the one who got to say that line, and I am very pleased. Unfortunately,
But,
unfortunately, it means that all the Drac viewers know me as the voice of BT if they know me at all, which is honestly terrifying.
Oh boy.
Yeah, who are you? I'm one of the ex-admirals. I've been here for bloody 6 years now. Hi, Admiral. I'm dad. How would a UN maritime security force
Wildly
work?
depends, and there's really no way to describe it
Basically,
because it depends on their mission, what's going on, and a whole bunch of other things. So,
Who's involved?
yeah, I would generally agree with the sentiment of badly.
yeah, basically.
Well, you kind of have your example there. There's like the Chinese doing their own thing naturally, technically underneath it, and then you have the U.S.-led mission. So,
Yep, that's basically it.
Hang on. The EU has a mission as well. That's anti-piracy. Right?
the
Operation
U.S. had
Atlanta.
plenty of stuff for carriers
But-
in the 60s. Like they were fine.
Yeah, it's about what you'd expect.
Actually, the 60s is right before the Soviet surface fleet actually became competent.
Yeah, the Soviet surface fleet basically goes a bit, well,
It took them a little while to get there, but then
They did get there.
1970s, they are a maritime power at that point. They
Yeah.
can put surface ships most places on the planet.
Yeah, they did get there. Like, this is the thing that like a lot of people do tend to go, Red Fleet not able to deal with USN. I'm like, yes, but USN also not really wanting or willing to go poking the Red Fleet in its home area.
No, the USN did. like,
Oh, okay. Again, stop blowing holes in my ship.
like that was like the entire goal of the maritime strategy, was to go kick their teeth in their own backyard and then kick the door in.
Granted, the maritime strategy is kind of only starts coming in
Kind of a late
in the
arrival,
70s,
but
yeah. I mean,
like-
I would think it's like when I talk about the Soviet fleet, surface fleet becoming competent, I'm kind of thinking like, it really was not much of a factor in planning like the 50s and 60s, but come the 1970s when like the Soviets going to have a substantial fleet, and they also start having a permanent presence in the Mediterranean with like a fleet level force, then that's kind of a different calculation for everybody in NATO. That would have been a pretty nasty brawl, and that's not even in a water that the Soviets directly bordered, and they would just set up lots of floating support stations and everything. It was just...
Up in the Atlantic, the teeth kicking fight would have happened off of Norway.
Yeah.
Or I should say fights.
There would have been multiple.
Campaign, really.
Yeah, there probably would have been at least one, if not multiple, battles of the North Cape happening again. Fairly shortly after NATO naval leaders realized, oh, there's not a major surge for the convoys, and oh, they're doing all this stuff off the coast of Norway, that's where the battle's shifting.
Anyone else got any more questions? Because we're doing quite well this evening. We had a lot of interesting discussions. Spawned from actually fairly decent... Like, they're the sort of questions that seem silly on paper, but they lead to really interesting discussions. Which I'm all for. No such thing as a bad question.
I don't always hold that same sentiment, but generally, yes.
Yeah, I was having some thoughts right there. Oh no. Oh no. Technically, a cereal is a cereal, strictly speaking, because it does come from a crop.
This is how... Phoenix, do we really want to go down this route?
No.
I don't
Like,
know.
I ignore Sea Daughters when he does this, because specifically for this reason. I do not want to go down this bloody route. Modernize HUD at the Falklands. I will say wait for the Red Fleet timeline, because you'll get basically that. Just wait.
Why did you keep... My response is somebody should be shot for incompetence for using HUD instead of Vanguard.
Yeah, basically. Like, if you've kept HUD, just take Vanguard instead.
Why bring Battleship when, well, actually, no, it's the way I would phrase it is, if you're going to bring battleships that late, I'm going to impose the opportunity cost of, did you guys forego having carriers, or did you guys forego having nuclear submarines?
Or did we forego having cruisers? Did we just not build the Tigers?
Oh, then the Tigers I don't think would cover the cost. But
Yeah, they wouldn't.
The Tigers were also kind of, they weren't even around for the Falklands, and they were kind of useless.
Yeah, you're right. There's a reason why I don't. There's a reason why I said the only time I'm going to cover that question is Red Fleet, and I'm not, and I'm going to leave that there.
Alternative is, what if you go without Type 42s? Because then that kind of kills them. I mean, frankly, I think losing any of those elements kills the whole operation. But
HUD and Vanguard at Falklands. Again, wait for Red Fleet. That's all I will say.
Wellesley, if you have HUD and Vanguard, the Brits can't do the operation because the cost of sustaining those units means they have had to give up their carriers. Just straight up. And without the carriers, the Brits are doomed. They can't do the operation. They have lost the Falklands.
My voice sucks right now. However, if you trade, if you have HUD and Vanguard, I'm not even sure you could sustain 3 commando, which by definition kind of puts into question the entire operation, because you're gonna sail to battle. It's not gunboat diplomacy. You are doing eviction. You are evicting the Argentinians for Port Stanley. Do you know what those two battleships can't do? They can't evict anyone. They can try to dislodge them with their 15-inch guns, but look at fucking Gold Beach to tell you how much that works. It doesn't.
Yeah, look, I love battleships as much as the next man. Some of the panel might say too much. But even I understand that they are costly beasts to run, and the cost-benefit analysis falls off a fucking cliff after the Second World War.
Also, especially for the Falklands in this particular instance, the Falklands is very much an amphibious operation first and foremost. And this is sort of a vampiric view. If HMS Invincible sinks, but 3 Commando can evict the Argentinians, by definition, the British can sustain that, or that's unacceptable casualties. However, the objective of the entire Falklands War is take back the islands. It's not,
This is also part of the reason my stance is, okay, they can lose Invincible and can carry on the operation.
Yeah.
But if they lose Hermes, they can't provide the necessary support.
Nope, exactly.
Because that naval task force's sole job is to use a lovely phrase, to set the conditions and then support the amphibious operation. Don't make me have to go and dig up the U.S. doctrine on amphibious operations. I will. You can't set those conditions with battleships alone.
No, you cannot.
I mean, again,
And if you don't have the amphibious forces, well, there's no conditions to set.
Good fucking luck, if you'll pardon the expression.
I think a better tale is, especially looking at the D-Day landings, especially for even where I think Hapless did a video on it. So if you want to do a podcast on it, he did a D-Day special for his War Room. It's a very excellent show. I recommend everyone watch. But if you're specifically into naval history, I am a big proponent of watching how actual naval gunfire and the probable reason why you're looking at battleships in the Falklands is because they'll definitely do gunfire support.
There is one additional benefit to bringing a battleship, either Vanguard or a modernized Hood with similar AA fit, down to the Falklands. If she's sitting in... Oh, for fuck's sake, we were talking about it and I've forgotten the bloody name! Fuck's sake.
I guess it can be a great AEW platform.
No.
That's
Cyclic, the name.
So,
the name.
San Carlos Water. But here's the problem, Fleet. You know what's a much better use of money? And also something the Brits never did to begin with?
Uh-huh.
Develop a proper amphibious force that allows you to land somewhere else.
Yes, I know.
Other than San Carlos Water and build up combat power on the beach in the face of a potential near enemy attack.
I know.
Because you bring your own APCs with you.
Yes, I know.
I mean, honestly, what really bugged me about it was entirely the central command structure of the Falklands did not have AEW at all.
Yeah. It sucked. Yeah, we know. No one's arguing that fact. But what I was going to say is, if you've got a battleship with blind fire 40mm radar directed and 5.25, with 5.25 is
Those
not really
guns,
much good.
Fleet, those guns were utterly incapable of tracking targets at that close range at those speeds.
Well, you'd better go and tell bloody Dr. Clark and Drac that, because they bloody lose their minds every time someone says Vanguard in the Falklands.
And I have some fundamental disagreements with both on the use of flak in the modern environment.
Works against helicopters, not so sure against fixed wing.
Now,
To be fair,
from my discussion with Drac, his view is largely not the 40 mils, but the 3-inch 70s or 60s, whatever they were.
Yeah, that
For
could
the
work.
British. Those guns.
3 and 60
Those guns
tell you.
would be more effective because they have the track rate. But my point of view is a better investment if you were going to spend the money on top just to keep the battleships around and sustain the whole fleet, even though Britain couldn't do this, But if somehow you had the money to do that, how about you develop a amphibious force that has amphibious tracks?
Yeah. No, I'm with you, Cyclic. I'm with you, but it's the UK during the Cold War. What is fucking reasonable procurement?
Damn, I gotta find a picture of this. Pretty
The
sure
Royal Marines to this day still think they can outmarch artillery fire.
But
one of
I
the
mean-
Burks came back from the Red Sea with a cruise missile mark on its 5-inch gun. I'm trying to
But-
find the picture, but
Yeah, I think a huge especially from the Falcons point of view, the Royal Marines are absolutely being bright. They just do not get the funding for some of their programs, which they've been desperately asking for, but they don't get it. Remember when they were asking for things like, oh, I don't know, like a actual air assault capability so that they can actually maneuver everywhere? That didn't get approved. We can't afford the Chinooks.
I know, it's... Royal Marines are not exactly known for being bright. Be careful where you say that. You never know when a Royal Marine might be listening.
I would say they absolutely do have the thinkers they need.
Yeah, they just don't get the funding, and that's fair enough. That's everyone. Welcome to the party.
Yes, what is funding?
That's unfortunately a very common problem for all military, so it's besides the point. We can grumble about it all day, but also, holy shit, there were 2 mechanized
We're people who talk about defense spending, defense procurement, and military history for, well, partially a living. It's our job to grumble about a lack of spending.
Also, holy shit! I just realized the Argentinians had 2 fucking mechanized battalions or brigades for the Falklands. Holy shit!
Yes, they came ashore in Amtrax.
No, that was the 5th Marine Infantry Battalion. The Argentinians reinforced a bunch of or dismounted mechanized infantry to help support the Marine Battalion there.
No, but the point is the Argentinians came ashore in fucking Amtrax, and the Royal Marines couldn't even fucking do that.
That's actually fine enough, because the difference is just that the Amtrak are... I'm not even sure Amtrak would be particularly that useful outside of like transportation purposes. It doesn't serve an IFE purpose. There's not like a LAV-5/8 LVTP-7 split. Nor would you want to in the first place, because outside of using, I mean, maybe the modern period, and you like using that Mark 19 for shit, I'm not so sure the Royal Marines really had much use for it. Especially since 2 of the battalions of the 3 Commander Brigade are very not Royal Marines and are paras. And with all the goofy, Saxon equipped air mobility they are.
Yeah, so the Falklands was an exercise in improvisation.
On
Words.
both sides?
For the Brits. The
absolutely.
Argentines, I don't know what to call that.
A little bit of a mess, but a lot of it was after, I think, post, occupation. A lot of it was task organized.
And I mean, I'm mainly talking from the British perspective here, but I can't fault the men. I can't fault the leaders because of what they pulled off with what they had. Who I can fault is the people who gave them what they had and not what they needed. It's a very similar attitude that I have today regarding the British military.
Holy shit, what the Argentinians had panhards? Okay, I'm not even sure if it's a Thatcherian thing, because of that...
Yeah, it's not just Thatcher.
Because it didn't go away before and after.
You know what got rid of the Categobar capability? It wasn't Thatcher. But I don't want to get into politics here. It's not a political, in terms of political party thing in the UK. It has just been a continual backslide.
it's really weird that I kind of forgot. No, the Argentinians had Panhard 90mm armored cars.
Yeah, at
Oh.
least the Brits brought CVRTs, but
Yeah, those are the vehicles they brought to the Falklands. A single squadron of them, which is the mod fit.
And I assume they never met scimitars or scorpions once.
I'm pretty sure they all surrendered. I think a huge component of the relatively ease of the, and that's that with the very big quotation marks ease of maneuver was that the Argentinians were what you might call Syrian level conscripts, which are it's not as a compliment, but
and the leadership on the islands really didn't want to.
I think a huge component of it is that there's two different brigade commanders, and they kept arguing with each other. I don't know in depth about like the different sort of like drama between the two brigade commanders. However, I do know that there are two of them, and then they keep fucking pulling units from both of them to go reinforce the island. So those mechanized infantry brigade commanders on the Falklands are under strength and competing with each other in terms of getting their infantry regiments on station. Which does not mean a very functional command.
I mean, one of the things that the RN found it. Sorry, RN, fucking hell! Come on, Fleet, pull your head together. Jesus, you're not even drunk; you're just on tea.
Don't worry, you can call it the British Navy and not have to worry about besmirching the name of Nelson or Jellicoe.
I wasn't even talking about the Navy. I was trying to say the bloody
I'm just
British
winding
Army.
you up.
I was trying to.
Well, to be fair,
I was trying to say
fair,
the
it is-
British Army. Oh,
technically it's also it is the Royal Navy though, because it's 3 Commander Brigade, which is a Royal Marine formation. Smile.
yes. Well, I think the British Army was that is actually quite funny.
They contributed 2 paras,
Yep.
or 2 para battalions, so second and third.
The
Or
ground
para and 3 para.
component on the British side of the Falklands invasion force. There, you happy?
You can call it Task Force 3171 Landing Group.
I will not do this.
The crayon munchers.
Anyway,
And then
those guys over there in the field. As I was where was I? Yeah, so there
Nobody
was
knows.
Yeah, that's me in a nutshell though, isn't it? Yes, you are allowed to laugh at that one. That was a self-diss. That's fine. But yeah, so there's actually an interesting dichotomy between artillery on both sides, because you have the Italian 105 pack howitzer in use by the Argentinians, and then on the other side you have the weapon that replaced that same howitzer with the British, the 105 light gun. The light gun absolutely smokes the Ottomilera 105. Absolutely cleans its chronometer.
That's not how artillery works.
No, just let me. It's just a better. It was found to be a very mobile piece of artillery that was fairly effective for the Falklands War. You could move it by Sea King or Chinook. You could tow it with a. You could move it if you really wanted to fucking punish the poor bastards on the ground. Get some blokes together and move the light gun across broken terrain if you really fucking wanted to.
You can do that with the Mod 56 Automalaria gun too.
You can. That's true, but in terms of actual
It does all of
ballistic.
this.
In terms of ballistic performance, the light gun
the
is
same-
a better weapon.
They're the same. They're the same rounds.
Yes, but the light gun is a better gun than the Otto Malera 56. 105.
I don't. At least for the Falklands, that didn't matter too much, mainly because the main sustainment issue was that neither side had that many shells to throw at each other.
You got a fair point there.
So, like, it's not particularly something that's up to know.
I just wanted
And
to-
also the fact that the
Range
Argentinians.
doesn't mean everything either.
Yeah, the only funny note was that Third Artillery Group from the Third Infantry Brigade had 155 millimeter guns.
Oh yeah, the guns they
There
took
are
off.
the two-seaters.
Yeah. The 155s they actually made.
They got two of them.
Yeah,
It's not that much.
I know. Then there's the Argentinian 155s. Or are you talking about the Argentinian 155s?
The Argentinians had 155s. The British never got anything higher than the 105s.
Yeah, because the Argentinian 155s were emplaced around Port Stanley, weren't they?
Goose Green has had at least a battery as well.
Yeah. The funny thing
And
is,
then-
they bought them as self-propelled, and then said, you know what, we like the gun, we don't want it self-propelled. Can you Argentine weapon manufacturers create us a towed
Self-propelled versus towed isn't a one-way street.
chassis? No.
Yes.
No, I'm aware. It's more just it's an interesting tidbit that they bought a
I think-
self-propelled gun and then liked the gun
mean-
and turned it into a towed gun.
Hey, smile. The Canadians did this.
Like, I'm not saying it's good or bad. It's just an interesting tidbit that people might not be aware of.
A probably bigger problem, at least for the British side, is that the Argentinians have 2 times the amount of guns that the British have.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just that's it. That is the main problem, at least with artillery, especially from the British perspective. Now, this is assuming, of course, and this is what you're supposed to be doing, that the Argentinians are going to be heavily competent and heavily motivated to defend the Falklands, which, yeah. Hey, someone call. Hi, I'm a fellow Canadian. I definitely don't live in America now.
Ah, good times. We've been on the Falklands
Alright,
War
how the fuck-
tangent for a while. Has anyone got any questions that aren't about the Falklands War?
Falkland Islands.
Okay, hold on.
No, you don't get to come in here with a Jersey accent and talk about them Falkland Islands
Okay,
over there.
hold on. Here's my thing. Favorite division.
That is a very, very broad question. Can you qualify?
1 divided by 0 is my favorite division.
Not that one. Like an infantry or like combat, like a land combat division. Go.
Don't look at me. I've no bloody clue.
There should be at least like 2.
I am not into division
I can't really say I have a favorite one. Like,
Historically,
what's the point of having a favorite? Is
Yeah,
kind of my view. Like, I don't see the point in having a favorite.
I'm like, they exist. They are there.
they have a storied history. They're it's asking you what your favorite ship is.
I suppose it would be 7th Armored.
The
I
land-
I
guess.
don't really have a favorite ship either. Like,
I mean, I have a favorite ship. It's called Hosh, but that's literally because it's a meme at this point, and I have to have a favorite ship
Hey,
called Hosh. But that's it.
Sorry, I'm I'm currently world building right now, so I'm just like, I've forgotten what the hell are these divisions doing?
DeWolfman asks, working on a video for the Yorktown class. Any suggestions? Depends what the video is. It breaking down the class? Is it breaking down their history? Is it breaking down why
God
they
damn it,
were
I just-
built? Is it about floors, air wing, war service? Like, and also, what do you mean suggestions?
Is it an engineering video? That'd be actually kind of interesting. It'd also be somewhat impossible nowadays, I suppose.
Damn it, I can't find this photo. This is gonna drive me nuts.
General overview. One thing I would suggest is you're treading over ground that Dr. Clark is treading over, that Drax tread over already. So what I might suggest is you come at it from a different angle. Don't do another general overview video because it's been done by Drac, it's been done by Dr. Clark. If you are going to
Need
do
to
a
find
general,
a niche.
yeah, find something to talk about. If you are going to do a general overview, do it in a way that brings up parts of the ship's history that the other two I've just mentioned haven't talked about.
Gunnery officer, Moab usage in conventional war. I'm assuming we're gonna use the, what's the, I don't know, I'm not an army. Large scale combat operations. Anyways, Moab is going to be used for exactly the purpose of what it's going to do. It's a big bomb. You throw it at a bunker, it goes away. It doesn't like the usage of hardened shelter points for command structures do not go away when you are fighting the Mujahideen compared to the Soviet army or whatever.
Not everything gets thrown at tank formations, interdiction, stuff like that. Like
Sometimes you
there's
do just
plenty of other uses for a bomb like Moab. Some of them don't even involve targeting enemy.
You can do infrastructure. You can do,
and of course,
I mean,
Clearing an LZ using the shockwave.
I'm not so sure that would be very useful.
which was the one?
Well,
that
they
was
did. They've done it in the past with its predecessor,
The
so that's
Daisy
why I
Cutter.
brought it up.
Yeah,
the Daisy Cutter.
that isn't particularly large-scale combat operations, I'd argue, but
No, but
I
it's
think,
still
like-
it's highlighting the point. It's highlighting the point.
True,
There are other
but-
uses for these bombs.
Yeah,
And-
there are, and like massive ordnance penetrator is designed around honestly being used by the stealth bomber fleet because it's a direct attack munition.
Which is only going to get bigger. B-21 raiding
and-
over.
I mean, okay,
Taking out very, very, very hardened installations in a couple of hits.
Couple? Why not just one?
Targets, because sometimes it takes multiple bunker busters impacting sequentially in the same spot. And guess what? You can do that with these things.
Yes, because laser guidance is a
It was
wonderful thing.
designed to service targets that previously would have required nuclear weapons alone to service.
I think the better question is, if your S3 officer cannot find a good enough reason to use a really big bomb at an
You
enemy,
need a new S3.
I think you need a new S3.
Also, in other news, if you don't mind me going on a personal tangent for a bit while we're talking about military officers, etc. So I was in Finland, as I'm sure some of you were aware, for the past few weeks, and I was talking to my cousin. As you know, everyone in Finland undergoes military service as part of, their life. And my cousin finished his a year ago. He went for the 12-month option, the longest you can take, and he became an officer in the Finnish Artillery Corps. He ran me through what he did. It turns out he's basically, as he described it, he's basically the person who decides who gets fires and who doesn't. So if a frontline unit says, look, we want fires, he goes, okay, you get fires. Or, no, you don't get fires. No guns for you. Which is neat. My cousin's an officer. Although that does mean that...
Nice.
Well, on the one hand, he's an artillery officer behind the lines, so he's probably safe if the shit hits the fan.
Command posts are high priority targets.
Yeah, but there is that.
Whoops. God, that actually reminds me.
He said he
Oddly.
trained on 2S1, the 122.
Gvozdka.
Yeah,
2S1 Gvozdka.
yeah. But
The Soviet era 122.
Yeah, but he said that while he was trained on that, as he was just bowing out of his active service role, he got to see the K9 Thunder come into Finnish service. And he said standing near that thing when it went off was like literally getting the wind knocked out of your bloody lungs.
It's a relatively high pressure 155
Mm.
compared to a
Although I will admit, my cousin usually...
somewhat lackluster 122.
Yeah. My cousin doesn't usually scare me, but the grin he gave me when he said the fucking Russians don't stand a chance. Yeah, I don't want to ever see him like that again.
I mean, they're Finns. They like eating Russians.
Yes.
Yeah, that actually reminds me. I had a... God, what is he like? I think it's a great uncle is what the relation is at this point. I think it's my mom's great uncle. But he joined the British Army, the Royal Artillery, shortly before World War II. He was put to do anti-aircraft, and he was sent on a technical mission to give aid to the Finns in terms of how to use anti-aircraft weapons against the Soviets when the Soviets were invading, which got really awkward because there were also German advisors there, and they just kind of had to like awkwardly look at each other across from the bar whenever they happened to cross paths. But
You're not here.
Yeah.
I'm not here. Let's not kill each other.
exactly, yes, we're here to help the Finns kill the Reds and leave it at that. And he certainly got plenty of other chances to shoot at Germans later in the war. So
It's very funny. I mean, I've got. One of my Finnish cousins was excluded from service because of mental issues. I think it was something to do with. I can't remember exactly. He's not autistic or anything, but I can't remember exactly what it was. My other cousin served, and one of my oldest friends from school is now an officer in the parachute regiment.
So they don't know what's good for them. Got it. Jumping out of perfectly good airplanes into firefights.
yeah.
Your knee and back injury is not service related.
Yeah.
Well, you
Although
never know,
I
man.
did
It's the case in
jokingly-
the US, that might not be the case for them.
I
You know,
did.
It's also real fun. Or I can talk about my
From the
family.
people I've met, it's the same way.
My grandfather. I've been trying to track his stuff. He was at the fall of Saigon, and he was just like, "Oh yeah, what'd you do there?" You were like, "Oh, you were a back officer." No, he was a ranger colonel.
Holy shit. Pardon my French. That's
Yeah.
I'm just like,
I
what?
did-
What do you mean?
I did jokingly say to my cousin, if the British paras are ever in your sector during the big balloon going up war that we all think is coming and they call for fire support, you better fucking give it. I don't want to look at the news and see my friends died.
I mean, it'd be really funny because my cousin just recently got back from deployment. It's real fun because she's just like, man, I wish a Russian would right now.
like the military, like
That's
all
the mood right now.
like all the military like chomping at the bit, like we really wish a fucking would. Oh fuck me.
I mean, hey, they're finally getting like actual tents in their bases for Poland now. So
Ooh.
they're working. The U.S. Army is going to actually work up to get a probable full-size division to start rotating in Poland.
Nice.
That's pretty neat.
That is actually pretty funky, yeah. Something I was gonna say. What was it?
That moment when the armored division returns to Europe.
Ha! Oh,
I mean,
by
hey,
the way, we spoke about that a while ago. That the US was standing up a division again. How's that going since we spoke? It's been a while since we actually spoke about it.
The one at Fort Wainwright? Hold on, let me just show you a photo from one of my friends there.
No, there's also First Cav, but you know.
What do you mean first cav? That's not a new division.
No, I think Fleet was referring to the Army 2030 stuff.
Yes, I think I am.
Yeah, moving to
remember-
fight at the divisional level.
Yes, yeah, that's what I'm referring to. Yeah.
I remember, there's one of the army officers had a GT, he's an engineer with 11th Airborne Division. He's at Fort Wainwright. It's up in Alaska. The problem is there's fucking bears there, and they keep jumping on the JLTVs.
Why do they keep jumping on the JLTVs?
Don't ask me.
Hey, if the engine's been running, they're going to be warm.
JLTV, but it wasn't our fault this time.
Fuck! It's the
Oh, you
bear.
mean on top of? Holy shit!
It's the bear.
So,
We have the bear
Spitfire,
gunners, aren't?
you,
Hey,
you kind
Phoenix.
of can't count. You kind of can't not count the Army National Guard
Yeah. Hey, Phoenix.
because the entire way the U.S. Army is designed to fight involves the National Guard
Yeah.
and reserves.
Hey, I wonder if those boys on the post can hardly bear it.
Yeah. Anyways,
Oh my
they
God.
had a bear live in their motor pool for a very long time.
Couldn't they just shoot it?
The bear
No.
wishes the Russian would.
Because then you get the Alaskan National Guardsmen shoot back.
You typically gonna remember to ask. Wow, an actual question. How much different was the role or usage of the Vulcan bombers compared to the USAF B-52? Originally, not very different. However, the RAF in the late 60s, early 70s switched to low-level penetration, which the B-52s never really switched to.
Fleet, you're incorrect.
Huzzah! I get corrected again. Yippee!
So I would say Originally, yes, the difference is quite big. The B-52s were designed to, how do I put this? I think what was the target cutoff point for SAC? Villages of 500 people or less?
I believe so. I don't remember.
Something like that. It was like 500 or 1,500 or less.
Wow.
One of the two, and I want to say it was 500.
That is...
Yeah, the B-52s were designed to, how do I put this?
remove Russia from the face of the earth.
No,
It wasn't just Russia. The strike plan was like everybody who's communist.
That includes Iran. I love you, AT Fairburn Corps, with your very goofy invasion plan of Iran in 1989.
So like, yeah, under LeMay, like, even if we weren't at war with the Chinese, if things escalated to the nukes, and this was before we flipped the Chinese to our camp, but even if we weren't at war with the Chinese and the war with the Soviets escalated to nukes, the Chinese were getting parking lotted too.
Western Europe is acceptable casualties?
Yeah.
Please remember that the Russians.
So let me say the
was in this-
part out loud on the US's perspective of NATO for most of the Cold War. The quiet part out loud being it's better to fight them over there than fight them here.
Well,
Europe
yeah.
was the battlefield,
Well, yeah, I get that.
intentionally.
Oh, no, I understand, and I get, I mean, it makes sense.
France coughing. You mean Germany is the battlefield?
No, France is too.
Although the French had a whole "you
I
step
thought it was
on
the French
face."
opinion on the matter, but
Curtis bombs. I'm sorry, I love that. Curtis bombs
So-
away. LeMay strikes again.
Like,
Go on.
and the B-52s did have a low altitude mission as well. But also, unlike the Vulcans, the B-52s started transitioning to cruise missile, or SRAM isn't cruise, but SRAM was more of a defensive-esque weapon for the B-52s to, well, destruction of enemy air defenses their way through. SRAM is a meme and I love it. It's also the missile's also capable of terrain masking as it approaches. It's fucking great. But
God. They were cooking.
and to the other thing here to illustrate is how do I put this? The Vulcans basically existed to bomb one, maybe two cities. Okay? The B-52 existed to bomb an entire geopolitical bloc.
Yeah, I get that. Muffin. The Vulcans also never did that. Vulcan was a bomber its entire life. You're thinking of Victor. Victor was the tanker that was turned out from a bomber. Valiant died quickly and early because it was shit. And then there was Victor and Vulcan, and then Vulcan had the better performance profile, so there was Vulcan. But Victor could serve as a tanker, so Victor stayed.
I wouldn't even, side note fleet, I wouldn't even say the Russians toyed really with putting a force on Iceland. It wasn't really that viable ever for them.
No, it's
Their amphibious forces were focused around Norway.
no cycling. That's not what I'm referring to. He's talking about the submarine, the submarine LST that the Russians toyed with, basically. That silly concept. The Russians toyed with the concept, but they abandoned it.
I
It's
wouldn't say
impractical.
the Russians toyed with it. I would say a design bureau toyed with it.
Yeah, but it was abandoned for fairly good and valid reasons. Because, yeah, why? Why do you need a submarine that's a landing ship? What is your use case? Like, seriously, what is the use case?
Well, when you don't think a surface ship has a chance in hell of getting through, that's usually where those ideas spawn from.
Yeah, but I'm genuinely thinking, what use case could there actually be for such a vessel in Soviet?
Okay, now here's the problem. Now you're thinking about it. You
Oh.
gotta understand. Most of the time, people
I
say
see
we're
where
gonna
we're
build a
going.
submarine, or we're gonna do it this with a submarine, or that. They usually say, "Wow, surface ships are very vulnerable. Therefore, if we put it underwater, that would make it more survivable." And they kind of stop thinking about it past that point. And I say this because I've read about these kinds of things extensively. Because in the 1930s, when the Italians were confronting the idea of we have to fight the British now for the first time, they they understood that like service forces trying to get out of the Mediterranean are going to be screwed because, the Royal Navy is much larger. They can cover the exits and they can patrol beyond the Mediterranean. They have lots of bases in the Atlantic, Indian Ocean, etc. So, constantly there was just a suggestion for imports of what if it goes underwater? So, like, underwater transport submarines, which I know did eventually lead to the R-class submarines that were built during the war. A handful were built during the war. But there was also a plan for a submersible like oil tanker, all these kinds of things, and they were never practical. And anytime anybody thought about it for more than 2 seconds, they shot it down. So this is impractical. But it kept on getting suggested regardless, because everyone thought they were a friggin' genius for bringing it up the first time.
Don't get me started on the whole Japanese idea for a flying fucking tanker aircraft. That's purpose was to go back and forth between the Dutch East Indies and Japan with fuel. Because that's a brilliant idea in 1944.
I think a problem, and I'll try to cite actual amphibious landings, because I think a lot of the problem is that, and this is sort of a pre-war doctrine. Hold on, I'm playing Warno. I need to shut this music down. It's good, but holy shit. The problem with even if you successfully use naval submarines for naval landings, is Salerno. You get Salernoed. The problem is that you do not have any forces to rapidly exploit, and a huge component of that is that you're generally starting off as a massive build-up phase. I think, you don't. An amphibious landing isn't a one pump and you're done. It's a constant build-up of forces on both sides to either throw them back into the sea, or do the whole amphibious landing thing. A huge problem with submarines in that is that you're not getting the same amount of even fissile material for infantry components within that sort of sector, let alone something like landing components of 79th Armored Division alongside, several infantry companies, which is like the bare minimum of what an actual successful large-scale amphibious operation, even like a small-scale operation, required. Several Clemson classes with Marine Raider battalions. I have no idea
those things. Yeah, I forgot they existed.
I have no idea where this the concept came from, and why is it getting resurrected now. I do think fundamentally, if you are doing any sort of even remote raiding operations with submarines, or with raiding operations with raider forces, you're the USMC Raiders, you're gonna go die, get 50% casualties. You're the Paramarines, whatever. I think the problem is that you're not getting the amount of sustainment forces that you can get with a submarine, because you can land submarines willy-nilly or whatever. Unless you're doing Marie, where your sole objective is resupply, you're not getting anything on there that's valuable. I mean, at best, make it an infantry platoon, but a Clemson could do the infantry company. That's nearly 4 times the amount of men in that, and that's a dinky little destroyer. Doesn't require specialist troops. You could use more old World War I stock. I don't know why you just not use a Clemson instead of just whatever the fuck the submarines were. God forbid you try to use it for anything more important, I don't know, landing invasions on Normandy, where, there's several instances where, a machine gun position is killing infantry companies, and oh wait, that infantry company just needs to get replaced right now. You need 4 submarines to do that, or you could just do a single boat. What I'm gonna do, I'm probably gonna do the single boat, because it's a lot easier.
Your typical gunnery officer. AGM-86, I'm pretty sure, is purely a strategic weapon.
No, there was a
Used-
conventional one, although
Oh, there was. Okay, never
yeah.
mind.
So you had AGM-88C conventional air-launched cruise
Okay,
missile.
different designation. Then.
Calcum. So that was retired and largely replaced by JASM.
Yeah, the
Um,
still exists, but
Yeah, like so the US has done a good number of bomber cruise missile strikes when we want to make a point. B-1Bs participated in many of the strikes on the Syrian government in response to chemical weapons use in the Syrian civil war. Cruise missiles have been were used in the opening stages of 2003 Iraq. In that case, those were actually Calcums. And they've been used somewhat in some other targets, but a lot of the areas where we've brought in bombers to do strikes of late, quite frankly, the bombers can do the strikes just fine using JDAMs and don't need to use cruise missiles. The stuff in Syria is because Syria actually has an air defense system. And what's the point of doing SEAD and putting F-16s and stuff at risk when you could just send cruise missiles in?
Yeah, it makes sense.
But if you don't need to send cruise missiles, when it comes to a bomber force, you just use direct attack munitions. But any of the strikes we have done against a conventional opponent, generally bombers have been involved launching cruise missiles. So, just those have been somewhat rare. I think we even did some in the 90s in the Balkans. I can't remember. This might have been B-2 Spirit direct attack munition strikes, though. I can't remember.
Right. Sea Dodders, please. A little bit of decorum wouldn't go amiss. I know, coming from me, that's the pot calling the kettle the tea cake.
I mean,
and
I could
the
just
cup black. But still, you can just.
I could just change Sea Otter's name to Quagmire.
No, 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 no. I've been aboard what basically is a Type 2A in Finland.
So as a way to get fast transports, like it was done by multiple countries in World War II, and it can be useful in certain uses.
And I would
Like-
point out that the Clemsons weren't the only ones done. It happened to Fletchers.
It's not like
It happened to
it's
Fletchers.
not like the flush deck destroyers were particularly useful in any other capacity, anyways.
Like, because it's important to bear in mind that there were a lot of islands in the Pacific that are very, very tiny.
I think a better question is
Not
looking at the
that
forces that
sleep.
use them, because they're almost exclusively used by the Marine Raiders, at least with the flesh deckers, which have a very specific role in terms of raiding islands. So you have a specific requirement of fast transports and do not need a lot of space because they're primarily light infantry based. They don't have a lot of native artillery. All they can do is just go on these little boats, paddle along shore, shoot everyone, then leave.
Plant a few charges, blow stuff up, and leave. Yeah,
I mean, no, they usually just
if
shot
they even
everyone.
do that.
Yeah. It's not like particularly you're doing too much in terms of a mass sort of, you're not the difference is that these are great for these sort of raiding parties and what you'd like call commandos, but they're not particularly useful for things like the Central Battle of Guadalcanal, where First Marine Division is smacking heads with the Japanese garrison there, where
They can't provide the supplies necessary or the
Right.
troops.
the term is throughput. However, because I'm not a logistician, because I'm not boring as fuck. Uh, the
I've
the
not heard you
objective-
laugh that heavily, Cyclic, for a while.
I think you might know the reason why I'm saying that, or the specific person I'm referencing.
Yes, that's why I'm laughing. I
Um,
know who you're
Well, they might
poking
drop
fun
an
at.
ammunition pallet on your foot.
I mean, I will
Oh
admit,
no, I'm not even referring. We're not referring to him.
Okay.
But I think a big problem is, and this is, I'm gonna poke fun at the navalist crowd. They have no idea how amphibious operations really work.
Yeah.
It's kind of really weird to see because it's like, oh yeah, no, it's just all the naval
You just
gunfire
go and you drop the troops is generally how they view it.
or like you've had like naval gunfire support works,
Mhm.
which is just like, oh yeah, remember all the times it failed? Smile. You can tell the Marines that they'll try to figure it out, but again, they're also eating rocks and trying to get anti-ship javelins. But
Don't get me. Oh, and using Iron Dome as their quote-unquote medium range air defense.
Screaming.
how did navies in World War II convert ships built before radar to carry it? So, it is pretty much a rip and tear, sort of not the Doom one,
I was about to fucking post a yes.
anti
just because
Maverick
of
with
that.
extra steps is that
No, it's worse.
it's a lot worse.
'Cause- The F Maverick has a much bigger warhead than a javelin.
Yes, it's also just a different shape, but like okay, so the general rule, and this is something that I'm not gonna put a super this is how it's done in every ship because God fuck I don't want to deal with that. This is a general discussion. The general rule is that you have to either build extra support for it, and either you throw a naval engineer at them and say, hey, calculate this, and then they give you some random numbers and say, okay, we can support this amount of weight on top of it, because it's not just yes, there's absolutely serious weights, like the second part of the question. Yes, there has to be serious considerations for weight, because it's not just oh, you add a ton to a ship. You're adding a ton to a ship that might be potentially way high above, and oops, that means you need more superstructure. Oops, that means you need more copper wiring, I think. I don't know if they're using
And this
copper.
is going relatively high up in the ship to potentially all the way up at the top. So now it's on a lever.
And also you have to consider the fact that people are going to have to maintain it. So it's not just you put it up there as well, but you'd also need to find a support staff or like a way to actually mount it on top of there that people can access, because we are not slime.
Or monkeys. Well,
Oh, we are
speak-
monkeys.
Speak for yourself. I'm a gelatinous blob.
Primates.
Didn't you know that?
but
We're not aquatic primates.
Like, speak for
but
yourself,
yeah,
boys.
no, I mean,
Like, I've been a
There was
gelatinous blob
definitely-
this whole time.
there was definitely a case of like maybe he's having to look into, do we have to pull off top weight in terms of equipment in order to fit the radar? Like I know, for example, like the Italians, when they were putting radar on their destroyers for the Soldati class, initially they for the first ship they put it on, they actually pulled the forward twin mount and replaced it with a single, as a way of, because this is by the point when they already had the aft single gun to company, or let's say a midship single gun, so they're going from 4 guns to 5 guns. They went back to 4 guns because they were worried about both top weight and also too much weight in the forward part of the ship from the radar and its associated structure. I guess it doesn't seem to have been a concern for very long though, because they had other ships fitted with radar that kept all 5 guns. But yeah, no, that was definitely a trade-off that had to be made, and you also had to, obviously run power, ensure that the ship had enough power to spare to send to the radar, because it really depends on what you're actually powering anything with when it comes to ships in this era, right? Because most ships have a mix of turbo generators and diesel generators. The turbo generators are based off of the operation of the steam turbines themselves, and thus only generate electricity if you actually have steam up. If you don't have steam up, then it's entirely down to your diesels, and usually you'll have a mix of, when you're at sea, of both diesels and turbo generators on, not necessarily all at once, just so you have, if one goes down, you have the other one, and you can bring more online as needed. But you know, you have to balance that out because you can absolutely build a ship that just simply does not have the power to spare. The French very famously built ships to begin with that did not have power to spare for all their functions. So, for example, the Mogador class with their pseudo turrets, because they really weren't properly turrets for their
No, they were
138.6 millimeter guns. Those they did not have enough spare power to actually, have the ship on and rotate those turrets in port. Unless the turbo generators were on, they could not rotate the turrets electrically. And even when they were out at sea and they had the ship going with all power, all generators running, they did not have enough spare power to do things like fit remote power control for the guns. It was distinctly not a good situation. I mean, these things really needed to have a cruiser grade power plant, but they didn't because they were built as destroyers, or rather they were built based on destroyer systems because that was closer to what they were in size. But
Hey, Muffin. Well, can you ask your question again? Because I've lost where you asked it.
Was it the one about were two-stage warship even being usable against a ship?
That sounds about right. 2-stage warhead?
Yeah. Can I just say, this is going to have to be the last question. I do have an interview at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning to actually get money. So I do have to go to bed at a reasonable time, sadly.
I hope it's a boy.
Now, just a minute.
Anyways, moving on. Yes, they can be. It depends what your target is. So there's quite a few anti-ship missiles out there right now that basically have 2-stage warheads. The Taiwanese love them, for example. And largely, if you're engaging something big like a super carrier, it helps because that initial charge. Typically, these are broach warheads in a modern context. That initial shaped charge creates the opening to get the other charge deeper into the ship. Am I dramatically oversimplifying for sake of time?
yes.
Yes. But broadly speaking, if you're engaging very large targets, they can be very helpful. They also allow you to have a missile capable of engaging a very large target that can still be quite useful against a small target, because that first stage warhead can generally eviscerate a small target.
Is that it? Are we all wrapped up?
The joke is when I saying that the Marines are using javelins for anti-ship purposes is that they're having javelins on dinghy boats, and then they drive out and shoot Chinese ships in ambush positions. This is not a joke. I've heard this being touted as a tactic.
Yeah, that can cause problems for small missile boats. It's not going to do.
Your Type 055. Yeah.
It's just going to look confused and fire a burst of main gun.
I use not small close range because small. What the hell is the effect of the Mark 1 human eyeball in terms of range? Is about like 500 meters at best. Maybe it's a little bit more because you're in flat plane and but on the other hand.
Also, it's not guided, and you're bouncing around on a little rubber dinghy.
Have fun with that, Chief.
You're like lightweight Klug is gonna get that range of 5,000 meters, man. Look, just shoot it at that range.
Yeah, basically. Right, I'm sorry to rush you all, but I'm afraid that I'm gonna have to call it here. So it's earlier than I would like, but well, some things do have to take more importance, I'm afraid. I hope you all enjoyed. It's been a fantastic ramblings, can I just say? A lot of interesting topics discussed. As usual, when Phoenix and Cyclic show up, always interesting. And you as well, Sierra, of course, not forgetting you. The Missile Man.
I'm definitely still working on my video.
Well, take care, folks, and I'll catch you.
Otters, that's one of my biggest fears at work. The Gulf sturgeon get huge and they love to jump out of the water.
Yippee.
And I've got sights on a river that's full of them.
Oh, God.
Have you tried shooting them?
One does not simply shoot sturgeon.
Shooting them is not gonna matter. These things are about as long as your average person is tall.
Yeah,
Just pre-fire
sturgeon.
them.
Yeah, sturgeon.
Right.
Shooting the water.
Sturgeons do not
Just-
fuck around.
Get a weapon alpha so you just throw depth charges ahead of you in the river.
Or better
Oh,
yet,
we're not doing
sonar.
that.
Environmental
Look, we had to
concerns.
shoot down.
Sonar. Just fuck the Coast Guard.
They're also
Constantly ping
critically
sonar.
endangered, so I'd rather
Well, of
not
course
get
they're
shot by
in danger. They're
FWC.
throwing themselves
Yeah.
into boats. It's dangerous.
Like there's a couple law enforcement types that you don't mess with in the US, and top of that list is fish and wildlife.
Yeah, we had a whole thing with this. Like, remember, like, that MacGuffin that occurred a while ago with the dude? Yeah. That was... You told us not to mess with them then. And I believe you.
Yeah, so for reference on the size of Gulf sturgeon, this is not uncommon to see on the Swanee River.
Large lad.
What that thing is.
Right, now, I really have to go now. I'm sorry.
All right, let's end this.